This video is about the 5 compartments of hell. There's the main, torture compartment of hell called Sheol. There's the paradise part of hell. There's Tartarus, the abyss. And lastly, there's the lake of fire. I'll start breaking down what each one is, what it looks like, who's it for. First two, they go hand in hand, Sheol and paradise. If we go to Luke 16, start in verse 22, this is a story Jesus tells of the rich man and Lazarus, or I call it the 2 beggars, because one begs in this life and one begs in the next life. Starting in verse 22, I'll just read it. And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lift up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham far off and Lazarus in his bosom. So the rich man, he was unrighteous, so he goes to the main part of hell where most people go when they die if they're unrighteous. Verse 22 now, that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Abraham's bosom was a Jewish term at that time, the idea of paradise. So that's where the righteous people go before Jesus rose from the dead. So no one can go to heaven until Jesus does it first, because Jesus is the first fruit. Jesus has to go to heaven first, and now when you die, you go to heaven if you're righteous. But before that happened, if you're a righteous person, you'd go to paradise, where it's essentially just kind of like a waiting room, where you're waiting for Jesus to complete his work on the cross and die, so that now we can go to heaven if we're righteous and we accept Jesus' forgiveness. So Sheol and paradise, they're like 2 sides of the same coin. The unrighteous go to Sheol and the righteous go to paradise until Jesus completes his work on the cross. Next part, let's talk about Tartarus. This can be talked about in 2 Peter chapter 2. We'll start on verse 4. For context, Peter is talking about false teachers. Verse 4, for if God spare not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and deliver them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Hell, in that verse 4, it's the Greek word for Tartaros. The Latin word is Tartarus. This is essentially, it's described as a dark abyss for punishment, what the Greek and Latin word mean. And it says that it's reserved for angels that sin. And we can read more about it. If you go to Jude, verses 5 through 7, we get more information. I will therefore put you in remembrance, though ye once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterwards destroyed them that believed not. And the angels, which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in a like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example of suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So this gives us a little more insight. We already know from the Peter passage that it is for angels, but this gives us more ideas why. The angels, which kept not their first estate, right, they're leaving heaven, and they're reserved in everlasting chains under darkness until the great day of judgment. In verse 7, it explains, even as Sodom and Gomorrah, in a like matter, the angels sinned by giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, right? This is most definitely referring to the part in Genesis chapter 6 where the angels have sex with women. They spawn an impure stock of humanity, and that's why God had to send the flood. I will make a separate video on that. If we skip ahead to Revelation chapter 20, that will tell us about the last 2 parts of hell. The first part we'll talk about is the abyss. It says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him in 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years shall be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little time. For context, Jesus and God came down and destroyed Satan and the Antichrist at the Battle of Armageddon, and now it's starting the 1,000-year millennium reign of Jesus on the earth. It explains an angel came down from heaven and has a key to the bottomless pit, or the abyss, and he lays hold on the dragon, the devil, Satan, right, all the bad people, bound them up and throw them into the abyss where they're to wait 1,000 years during the millennium. And then later on in the chapter, it talks about the last 5th compartment of hell, the lake of fire. Starting on Revelations 20, now we're on verse 10. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. Right? So for context, this is after now the 1,000-year reign. Satan gets loosed from the abyss, tempts the nations, but God destroys him. He gets cast into the lake of fire now. It's kind of like Sheol, but this is where people go for all eternity, right? They go from Sheol to the lake of fire. Starting in verse 11. I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to those works. This is all the unrighteous dead being resurrected in their bodies now, coming up to the great white throne, being judged by all their works by God. Reading on in 13, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. So this is all the unrighteous people being judged for all their actions, good and bad. It says 14, and death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So this is all the unrighteous people that don't have their name written in the book of life because they were unrighteous and didn't accept God's forgiveness by Jesus dying on the cross for them. There you have it. These are the 5 compartments of hell.